A shocking discovery about fire retardant used in the Eaton and Palisades fires. LAist partnered with USC researchers to test samples in multiple fire zones and found they contain heavy metals. Environmental agencies say the findings could pose a risk to humans and wildlife. Jacob Margolis is a science reporter for LAist. Good morning. Thanks so much for joining us here.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So let's talk about how you did this research. You actually went out yourself and collected those samples because you couldn't get them from the manufacturers.
Yeah, we reached out to CAL FIRE, U.S. Forest Service, and Perimeter Solutions, the company that manufactures the product called Phos-Chek. None would send even a thimble's worth of fire retardant to us. And so what I did was after the Eaton and Palisades fires wrapped, I literally trekked into the mountains, gathered samples, and took them to researchers for testing.
So now let's talk about what you found.
Yeah, so what we found was a whole bunch of heavy metals. So cadmium, chromium, lead, antimony, and such. And so, you know, we were surprised, but kind of not. We know that there were heavy metals in other variants of the retardant, but this specific retardant, which is used across California, and is supposed to be a particularly clean type of retardant, you know, this is the first time anyone's reporting it.
Yeah, the manufacturer says we don't add any metals to our solution. It is safe.
Yes.
And then they're claiming that your samples were contaminated. So can you talk about how you controlled for that?
Yeah, so we had our samples gathered from the field, but then we were also able to obtain unused Phos-Chek as well, and then took it back to the researchers, and we found very similar numbers that time as well. So, you know, people can see the numbers online on LAist.com, and you can compare all the results for yourself.
So what does this mean for the health of the community, the health of the animals who live in these communities?
Yeah, the numbers of the amount of heavy metal is low enough in the retardant where it's not going to really pose a huge risk to you. If you come across it hiking, if your pet runs through it, you should really just wash it off your hands. That said, there are really big questions, especially for firefighters and people at air bases who mix the stuff. There's no evidence, there's no mention of heavy metals in the safety data sheet or any other publicly available information from the company about potential contamination. And so with that lack of transparency, you can't really make a proper, you know, judgment when it comes to risk in the field.
Is this industry, is this solution heavily regulated? Are there state or local people who are going out and testing it as well?
Well, the product is tested at the federal, and it has to qualify for on a federal list. It is tested for heavy metals. We tried to get those test results, and they would not share them with us.
So what now? I mean, when you talk to the fire department, are they saying we need this fire retardant, like this is essential in fighting fires?
Both the U.S. Forest Service and CAL FIRE have said that it's an absolutely a critical tool. But again, we spoke with firefighters in the community, and it's a feeling of at least tell us what we're dealing with. They've had so much stuff that they've dealt with, like PFAS and gear and whatnot, that's lead, that's potentially tied to cancer, that people just want to know what is being dropped on them.
Yeah, and you bring up an interesting point because you were saying you could like walk through it or your animal runs through it. You come into contact with it, you know, just for a moment or two. Yeah. But the firefighters who are actually on the front lines, they're often surrounded by this Phos-Chek. So what does it mean for them? Yeah,
I mean, I think that there's already testing going on that's tracking heavy metals in the blood of firefighters. I think that there should probably be more thorough testing that also possibly looks at the folks that work on air bases to see, hey, what are their heavy metal numbers? Heavy metals are a big issue when it comes to fire. They're released naturally in the environment, and they're, you know, especially when we're talking about houses burning, they're an issue. And so really the research that needs to happen is we need to be able to narrow down kind of this specific part to really assess risk properly.
Yeah, well, it sounds like you put a lot of work behind this, and it's obviously a very important topic because we see that Phos-Chek whenever we have these big fires. So thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Thank you for having me.